Welcome to the Behind the Wind podcast. I'm Lauren Lane. For over 50 years, the LSI team has been dedicated to the science of business development. We've seen the impact of our work and how it's evolved into economic development and now social impact work. This week, Sean and I are joined by Summer Gray, LSI's Chief of Staff, to discuss a life-changing trip that Sean took to Africa in 2021, the student he's sponsoring, and the impact that the trip has had on him and on his family. Let's jump in.
Hey, Summer. Thanks for joining me on this episode. This is an episode that we've talked about for a long time, and we've finally put this on the schedule to do this recording. So thanks for being with me.
Of course. I'm excited.
You had really lived through a lot of this up front and during and after this event, and so we thought that we'd go back and talk about some of the things that I did in this trip to Africa, which was this just amazing experience.
Yeah.
So in the middle of the pandemic, my high school son came to me and said, I've decided that I'm going to go away for 2 years and do a service mission. And with all of my kids, I mean, I've talked about this a little bit. We've always had this tradition that as you graduate, you can pick somewhere in the world that is of interest to you, and we'll go there. And it has always been this rite of passage for my kids and for me to really spend that last bit of time with them. I going into college or doing whatever they do. This has been sort of a transition from high school to college. And so Sam came to me and said, I think I want to go to Africa. And when that happened, if you remember, no one was traveling.
Yeah, I do.
Kenya and Tanzania, which is where we were going, had been shut down. Mm-hmm. And so we started looking into this and didn't think it was going to happen. And then you came to me and said, yeah, I think we can put this together. These trips, just the logistics of these trips, usually take a year. A year. To schedule it, to do all of the things that you need, the flights and the visas and all of that, it takes a year. By the time we got approval to go to fly into Kenya, and even going into Kenya, we didn't think we were going to be able to go to Tanzania. It was about March, right?
Yeah.
Or April.
Yeah. It was right before Sam graduated. Yeah.
And for this trip in June.
Yeah.
So we consolidated a lot of the planning and into 3 months.
Yeah, we did. And we had really good resources. We had a travel agent. We had
fantastic.
The Mikado, the Safari Group. We actually had
amazing.
A lot of support. So we did pull it off, but we shoved a lot into 3 months.
And you may remember, this was not something I was excited about. I had been to a lot of the world, but had not been to Africa. I just didn't. I thought at some point I'd go there, but it was not high on my priority list. I've been to, 200 or 300 countries, but had not been to any country in Africa. And so I was sort of lukewarm on this, but this is what Sam wanted to do. And so I said to you, I need your help. Yeah. I need your help in putting this together. And as you remember, just the visa process alone was horrible.
Yes, I do.
So a lot of the planning was getting approval to travel, which at that time there really was not
a lot of COVID protocol.
COVID protocol. In fact, when we were there, we were tested twice a day.
Yeah.
Twice a day for COVID while we were there. But also, just to go, I had to have so many vaccinations. Do you remember this?
Yeah, and they had to be like
Spaced out
a certain time, certain weeks from each other. So I remember having to coordinate that with you and Sam. Yeah.
So I had 16 vaccinations to get my visa. Remember all of that. So I mean, there was a lot of build up to this that we thought it may or may not happen.
Yeah, I know.
Because we couldn't get the visas until
Yeah.
we could show that I had vaccinations, and we had to space that out. It was, and I mean, I don't know if you remember this. Even a week before we were supposed to leave, they had shut down Kenya and said we're not going to allow any travel in or out of Kenya because of COVID. And then right before we ended up going.
I think that, like with me and a lot of your travel, I'm always the one that's like, I feel stressed about this. I'm so worried about this. Like, this trip I was really,
Oh my goodness.
I was very worried. Like, will they get over there and get sick? And then will they not be able to come back home? And there was a lot of worry just like in going to that place with what was going on with COVID. And I just didn't know enough about Africa to really know, like, is it safe? Like, are you going to get sick there? I mean, there was a lot of worry.
And I mean, we worked on this almost every day for 3 months, didn't we? It was incredible.
And I remember working with Sam, like, you have to come in. I need you to do this. I need you to go over here. I need you to... I remember doing that with Sam, and he was so cute.
He was one of the COVID kids who really didn't have a high school. He did not go to class for most of his junior year and then all of his senior year.
Yeah.
The other interesting piece of this that was just... I was looking back at some of this in preparation for our discussion, and he had not been to class for that whole year, but his school decided that they were going to finally let the seniors have a prom if they could show, if they came with a negative COVID test. And this was a week before we were supposed to leave for Kenya, and he tested positive.
I remember this so
and
well.
couldn't, and his cute date,
Yep.
didn't have a high school either, and who he'd asked, the two of them didn't get to go to prom. But the next week, he tested negative. I mean, I thought after all of this, we weren't going because we had to show within 48 hours of boarding that. Or maybe it was less. I forgot now. Maybe it was 24 hours.
You have to have a 24-hour COVID test.
24 hours.
Before you go, yeah.
And we thought, he's going to fail this.
Yeah. I was thinking, all that work is going to be down the drain.
And
yeah, he got it.
It was negative, and we both got on a plane. We went into Amsterdam and then flew into Nairobi, and we were one of the only people on that flight from Amsterdam to Nairobi. There were very few people on that flight.
One thing I have to say is I've had the privilege in my job of like working with your kids a lot on travel. I have. And I've gotten to know them individually. And I think your girls are so cute. And I love their different personalities. But I really got to know Sam.
You did.
I
got talking to him every day.
His personality. And through the whole thing, what I really love about Sam, he's so positive. He's so positive. He's never negative. Nothing was like stressful. I would be stressed, and he's like, "It's gonna be fine." Like he's just a positive kid.
He is, and just people love him. And it would. I'll tell you, COVID was hard for him too. It was because he's so social, such an extrovert that he had a tough time during COVID and. Well, and I mean, there's a side story to this as well that we'll circle back on. But he came to me about that time and said, "I'm going to go serve a service mission for 2 years." I said, "No, you are not." And I should have said, "Yeah, that's a great idea, Sam. You should go do that," because then he would have said, "Oh,
I don't want to."
No, I'm going to go. So I knew that I was not going to see him for 2 years, and he's still on the service mission now. So this time with him was, for a lot of reasons, it was just really a special time for me to spend with him before he left and after this weird time in high school. So, as I said, we were one of the only people on this flight from Amsterdam to Nairobi. When we got to Nairobi, which is a huge city, and I'd like to talk about Nairobi at some point because as much as anything, being immersed in the Nairobi culture was just such an incredible experience. But we got to Nairobi and we were taken to this camp outside of the city, and then for 2 weeks we were on this safari following the wildlife migration through Kenya and Tanzania, which was just incredible.
Yeah.
A couple things I remember. We were the first safari into the parks for 2 years. From the time that they shut down, or not quite 2 years, I guess, but when the park shut down in March of 2020 until June of 2021, they had done, there was no tourism at all. We were the first group that went back into the parks since February of 2020. Mm-hmm. So that was a unique experience, and a lot of the tribes and the guides that we worked with were just so happy to see us because they hadn't been working and had not had any tourism during that time. So throughout this, I had this idea in my head of what Africa was going to be like, and it was nothing what I had anticipated. I really thought this safari was going to be, we would see a few animals, and we saw millions of animals.
I know.
I had no comprehension of how many animals there are in these parks. And one of the things that I hope that I can convey about this trip, that being there firsthand, which I was surprised by, you hear about the poaching in the parks and how horrible it is. Between Kenya and Tanzania, they've almost eliminated poaching.
Oh, wow.
There was such a problem with poaching over the last 100 years, and it has almost come to a halt. Both countries have become serious about poaching laws, and they have these rangers that patrol the parks with guns that they'll kill you if they see you in a position trying to poach animals. So I'd heard that the challenges and extinction rates due to poaching of a lot of these animals, like the elephants and the rhinos, we saw thousands of them. Mm-hmm. I mean, every day we saw thousands of animals.
Lions. I remember the lions.
We would count the lions every day.
And like in the trees and stuff.
I mean, and we were right there with them. So many of these lions they were oblivious. We'd drive right up to them. We'd be 3 feet away from these lions, and they didn't care. Mm-hmm. I was showing pictures to Lauren and Jake on one of these lions that was in a tree. She was asleep. We drove right underneath her, and we were in a open Land Rover that you could stand up in. I could stand up and touch her paws. We were right underneath her. Mm-hmm. She was laying in this tree on this branch that extended out, that was probably, 10 feet above the ground, and I could have reached up and touched her paw. She just was oblivious to it. We saw rhinos. We saw a baby rhino. I mean, things that I had never thought we would see. I really had in my head that we were gonna see a few animals a day, and it was just.
I don't think anybody understands the volume of animals that are really there.
I mean, so to give you a sense of this, we followed the migration from Kenya into the Mara River area, and we followed them down. There's 2 million wildebeest that are on this migration, that they follow the water. They go to these various areas, and this has been going on for millions of years, following where the water is. That's what this is about. So in the process of this migration, you got to see a lot of the animals that were resident to these parks that didn't migrate. We stayed in tents. We were in the park in these tents. Every night we would lie in these tents. And we were on safari for 12 hours a day. And we'd usually start at sunrise about 7 o'clock, and we would end about 7. So by 8 o'clock at night, we were exhausted. And it was dark, too. Yeah. And there was nothing to do. We were in these camps in the middle of these parks. And we would lie on these cots in the park, and you could hear the lions roaring and the hyenas all night long in the middle of the preserve. One of the things that was memorable and really special about this trip is that we were assigned a Maasai warrior, and the Maasai tribe is a fairly small tribe, actually, in Kenya and Tanzania. There are about 3 million people. Kenya is about, the total population of Kenya is about 55 million people. Tanzania is about 65, I would say. So about 100 million people. So both countries are about the size of Italy, I would say, or a little smaller than France. That's the population of those countries. So one of the largest tribes in these countries, comprising about 3 million people, like I said, Tanzania and Kenya both have together, they have about 100 million residents, and there's about 3 million Maasai warriors. And the Maasai warriors have this really storied history. They always dress in bright colors, and they're known for being exceptionally brave and their culture and music. But we were assigned this Maasai warrior. His name is Simba. Simba is lion in Swahili. And he was our bodyguard. He was assigned to protect us from the animals and any poachers or whatever we encountered. So, and he was always dressed in the traditional red robes, and he had a spear. To become a Maasai warrior, you had to, in the day, you had to kill a lion with your spear. So, and he was one of those Maasai warriors. They've ended that now, but he was one of the original Maasai warriors. And the first night that he was watching over our tent, he said to us, "You don't have to worry. You can sleep all night. I'll protect you. I don't sleep." So he would stay up all night long with his spear outside of our tent, and if any animals or people came near, that he was our bodyguards.
It's awesome.
For the whole trip. And we got to know a lot about the Maasai culture, which was just, these people are fantastic. And we ate a lot of the traditional Maasai food. They're farmers. They raise cattle, and so a lot of their food is milk, dairy, cattle and dairy, so just fascinating. So for 2 weeks, as I said, we followed the migration of the animals through all of the national parks, starting in Kenya and going into Tanzania. And some of the places we got to see Kilimanjaro and a lot of these famous national parks and there. And a lot, what people I think don't realize is that a lot of the two countries now have been designated national parks. And inside these national parks, it has been controversial, but the governments have moved a lot of the tribes out of the parks. There's 40 primary tribes. The Maasai are one of the tribes. And then there's another 400 clans and sub-tribes. So it's a huge amount of tribal culture that has existed for thousands of years inside these parks. And And over the last 20 years, the government has transitioned a lot of the tribal entities out of these parks in an effort to protect the wildlife. One of the most interesting places that we was in a it was in a camp, the Barana Lodge in outside of Kenya. It was early on in the safari, and we stayed at this place where the Lion King was all based. So if you've seen the Lion King, and surprisingly, it's pretty
like the Rock,
good.
like the Rock,
the Pride Rock,
yeah,
Pride Rock. That's where this is. And our tent, we stayed in this camp at Pride Rock, where Disney brought in all of the Lion King team, the animators, and they were there for months watching the animals and building this story of the Lion King that actually happened. And we stayed right there. And I mean, the things about the Lion King that they got right is just amazing. All of it.
Well, with the animals and
the animals and their personalities. And I mean, I think we look at the Lion King as this cartoon, and now it's gone to Broadway, but it really was based on this place in Kenya where the Disney team came and studied the animals and built this story there.
Interesting.
I remember being at Pride Rock and that night sleeping in the tent, and it was just magical to hear all the animals, the lions roaring, and at night watching the giraffe go across the plains. I think one of the landscape was so different than what I had anticipated. As I said, I've been to most of the countries of Europe. I've been to most of the countries in Asia, and I had spent very little time in Africa. And I think people have this idea that the Serengeti and the national parks between Kenya and Tanzania it's desert. It's not. It is at a high elevation. You're at 6,000 feet. So at night, it got cold, and we stayed in one of the lodges where it was down in the 30s and 40s, and everybody was bundled up in winter attire, and so you have this idea. It's the African Serengeti is a desert climate. It is not. It's its own high altitude ecosystem that is this really complex grass system and trees that and it's not jungle either. That's the other thing. I mean, I think people either have this idea it's the desert or it's jungle. It's neither of those things.
I had a vision like it's barren.
And it's not at all. It's actually the biodiversity is incredible, and that's why it supports so many of these different types of plants and animals, the fauna and flora there. So it's incredible. One of the stories, I don't know why I thought of this, but we were really deep into Tanzania. I mean, in a very remote area, and we got out. Occasionally we'd get out if it was safe and there weren't animals around. We got out and we were walking around, and it wasn't on a road. We were in the middle of nowhere, and just walking around. Sam reaches down and finds $100 US dollar bill in the middle of the Serengeti. And remember, there had not been other people. Safaris in the parks for a year and a half, and so that was just a weird thing that we found this $100 bill. He found this in the middle of the Serengeti. So what an amazing experience to see that and really to understand what's happening in Africa, I think there's still this perception that the poaching is so bad, and that you go over there and you wouldn't see a rhino, or you wouldn't see a hippo, or some of these animals. And we saw thousands of them, thousands of every one of these animals that we thought I wouldn't even see one of them. I had this expectation we would not see a lot of animals. And it just
I think there's like an appreciation that it's still very original. Like it hasn't been developed, and it's not like, I think there's an appreciation that it's still in its kind of its natural state.
And I'm so impressed with what Kenya and Tanzania are doing. Now, I know a lot of the other African countries are still struggling, but what Kenya and Tanzania are doing to protect those parks, even up to, I mean, it's fairly controversial. I think they're taking radical action in these parks to protect the animals, so much so that it has impacted a lot of the tribal entities, which has been very controversial. And so some of the anthropological culture is being lost as a result of that, interestingly enough.
Well, I want to talk about the culture with you, but I would like to know, I think I asked you this too, but was there a time where you were afraid?
No,
no animals were charging after you.
We had, and we saw some amazing things. I mean, we talked about the lions. So every day it was a game. We were going to count how many lions we saw, because I'd heard from other people, and I just think growing up, reading the stories of Africa and reading the Hemingway stories, and I had this idea that they're so elusive, and that we weren't going to see any lion. And it was just, every day we would see 50 to 60 lions, and I mean, some days we'd see 100 or more. And it gave me an appreciation that, these stories of the big game hunters going there and tracking down these lions. Let me tell you, we just drove. We drove right up to the lions. We were 5 feet from them, and they didn't move. I mean, so when I think back on how our culture has portrayed the big game hunters, and just the stories of Hemingway going there, and it's terrible. Yeah. It really was. There was. I don't think there was a lot of game in it, because those animals are everywhere and they don't move.
Yeah.
They were oblivious to you. They just sat there.
So it wasn't scary.
It was not scary. And then having this Maasai warrior protecting us the whole time, I'm telling you, he was amazing. And we got to know him, and it was incredible. I never felt unsafe. We did, one of the last days in the Serengeti, in the middle of the Serengeti, we did a balloon flight for about 200 miles over we got up in the middle of the night. We were down there so that we were ready and in the air by sunrise. And so we got to see a lot of the animals in the drinking and feeding in the morning. That was the scariest part of the trip.
The balloon.
The balloon, and then the balloon went down right in the middle of all the animals. So, and it was a few minutes before they came and picked us up, and we were just out there with the lions and the elephants, and so it was interesting.
Well, I know that I wanted to talk to you about the school.
Yeah.
Because I can't remember how you got to the school or who took you to the school, but I think it's a impactful story about the school.
So one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to learn more about Nairobi, and so we spent 2 days in the Nairobi slums, and I had been to India. I'd seen the Mumbai slums. Mm-hmm. In the 90s, when there were slums in China, I'd been to the Shanghai slums. I'd been to the Beijing slums. Those are all gone now. Yeah. China has no slums around their big cities anymore like they used to. But I wanted Sam to experience that too. We spent 2 days in Kibera, that is one of the largest slums. If you Google it, it'll say that the Kenyan government has taken control and it's minimal. That's not the case at all. There's 2 to 2 million people, I would guess, that live in the
slum.
In
Poverty. Poverty.
At less than $2 a day is what they live on. It's amazing to see the economy there, because even in these areas, they would, every bit of the economy that you can imagine, from, there's hotels there that are, maybe 50 cents a night, where there's places that you could eat there, and there are people doing services for each other. So it's its own economy. And where I have this economist history and thinking, and a lot of the work that we do, the economic development that we do in our company, I'm fascinated by the ecosystems of these slums. But the poverty is incredible. They would not let us take pictures, so I've got no pictures of that. They said, if you take a picture of the slum, we'll escort you out. So there is a lot of, I think there's a lot of concern, especially where so much of Kenya is now dependent upon tourism, that they don't want people to know how extensive and difficult the slum is. But it is, think about 2 million people, or maybe even up to 3 million people that live in this slum. In the middle of this slum is a school, though, and the whole purpose of this school is you have to be accepted into the school, and it's highly coveted, and it is right in the middle of the Nairobi slum. And they're sponsored primarily by American and British sponsors. All of the residents of the school, they get to go there, and they're taught skills. They're taught traditional middle school, high school disciplines, and then most of them are able to leave the slum and go on to do amazing things. Our guide there she told me this story that it was just she and her mom that lived in the slums. They lived on the street. And she would cook fries every day. She'd get 3 or 4 potatoes that she'd have enough money to buy potatoes, and then she'd cook these French fries and sell them, and that was enough for them to survive, barely. But she was one of the kids in this school who then ended up going to the University of Kenya and graduated with a degree in business, and is now working for a company in Nairobi and got out of the slum. So that is going on there, and it was fascinating to be in this area for 2 days, just learning about a lot of the challenges of what this population faces. And so it was a couple of things that happened that I think were interesting. Sam was really moved by that, and you remember I said that he found this $100 bill in the middle of the Serengeti. He gives it to the school, and which was $100 was this huge gift.
Yeah.
And he had some money that he gave, and then we decided that we would sponsor one of the students. So we've been doing that for a couple of years, and it's been fun.
That's the part of, I was thinking there's different parts of this trip that I think are impactful, like that left an impression. When I remember talking to you, obviously, like the safari was cool and the animals were cool, but I remember you talking about the school and the students and I remember that was like a really big part of the trip. And so
it was just, like I said, I had been to the Mumbai slum. We talk about 3 million people in Nairobi slum. There's 10 million people in the Mumbai slum in India. And I spent a week there several years ago, and I think a lot's changed since I was there. But so I was prepared. Sam had never seen anything like that. He'd never experienced it, and I think it was so enlightening to see how the poverty of these individuals, and yet they're continuing to. They're happy in a lot of cases, and they don't know anything else. And
yeah, so the agency that I guess you partnered with, they will send emails from this boy that you sponsor.
You get them all.
And I love them. I read them, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like so attached to him because he's so appreciative in his notes to you.
Right.
Like you can tell it's just changed his whole life.
It's amazing.
Yeah, so he's a cute kid.
It was one of the most memorable parts of this trip, and
you just made a big difference for him.
It's been exciting, and I think it's been something that. So I send all of those letters to Sam.
And does he reply? Does he talk?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's been a way that we've stayed in touch there, and I'd love to see our company do work in some of these areas. I mean, both Kenya and Tanzania, I really think are emerging economies. The people are they're amazing. They are really beautiful people, and the culture is incredible. So we have an interest in taking some of the work that we've done in the U.S. into some of these African countries, especially the East African nations.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think as we wrap up, I think, going into this trip, I think I was thinking, and I'm sure you were thinking, like, didn't know what to expect. But in hindsight, I think of all the lessons that Sam learned that you would never be able to teach him here. Right. So instead of taking him on a trip like on a beach where there's no real lesson, I think it was a good opportunity for him to see, something that taught him a little bit more about our world and our different cultures and different people. And I think it was
overwhelming.
Yeah.
From the culture to the biology, these guides were so knowledgeable about taxonomy, about all of the relationships, and they had been doing this for years. These guides had been guiding safaris for 30 years, and really were so knowledgeable about the animals, about the flora, about the ecosystem in general. It was incredible.
Experience.
And then you layer the cultural on top of that, the art and the food, and it was an amazing experience. And I encourage anybody to do that. I really was thinking, do I really want to go there? There's a lot of other places that I thought were a priority. It was one of the most special experiences that I've ever had, and then to share that with my son, just the two of us, was just incredible.
Yeah, a good experience for you both.
It was amazing.